Is joy a mitzvah, and is sadness a sin? The Rambam tells us in mitzvah number 54, mitzvah nun dalit. There the Rambam says that there's a mitzvah to rejoice on the festivals. And it goes on to say that there's a verse in Deuteronomy 16:14 that states over there, V'samachta b'chagecha, and you shall rejoice in your festival. From this it would seem that there's only a mitzvah to rejoice on a holiday, like Passover or Shavuos or Sukkot. But the Rambam goes on to say in the laws of Lulav, chapter 8, law number 15, that the happiness with which a person should rejoice in the fulfillment of the mitzvahs and the love of God who commanded them is truly a mitzvah gedola, aveda gedola. It is truly a great service. In other words, that there's not only a mitzvah to rejoice on the festivals, but according to the Rambam, there's a mitzvah to rejoice when a person does any mitzvah. And furthermore, he goes on to say, whoever holds himself back from this rejoicing is worthy of retribution. And he quotes a pasuk in Deuteronomy 28:47. Over there it says, Tachas asher lo yavadta Hashem lekecha b'simcha v'tuv levav. Over there it says, because you did not serve God, your Lord, with happiness and gladness of heart. So according to the Rambam, when you do a mitzvah, you have to do a mitzvah with joy. And he goes on to say, whoever holds himself proud, giving himself honor, and acts haughtily in such situations, and therefore is not going to rejoice, is a sinner and a fool. And concerning this, Solomon warned in Proverbs, do not seek glory before the king. And then the Rambam goes on to conclude, and he says, anyone who lowers himself and thinks lightly of his person, of himself, in these situations is truly a great person. And he is worthy of honor, because he serves God out of love. And thus King David, the king of Israel, declared in Samuel 2, chapter 6, I will hold myself even more lightly esteemed than this, and be humble in my eyes, because there is no greatness or honor other than celebrating before God. As it says over there, King David was dancing wildly and whistling before God. So this is the story in Shmuel Beis, Samuel 2, chapter 6, that King David, after 22 years, brought the Ark of God up to Jerusalem, and they began to celebrate. And David HaMelech was so wild in the celebration that his wife Michal said to David HaMelech, this is not the way a king is supposed to act. And she's quoted by saying, how honored was the king of Israel today, who exposed himself today in the eyes of his servants and maidservants, as one of the boors might expose himself. So Michal, his wife, the daughter of King Shaul, basically told David, you are not acting appropriately. And David answered Michal, no, on the contrary, before God who chose me over your father and over his entire household to appoint me as ruler over the people of Hashem, of Israel, before God did I rejoice. So implying that even though he was a king, yet he let himself go totally in ecstasy and dancing, because that is the way a Jew is supposed to do a mitzvah. You're supposed to do a mitzvah with joy And don't be so arrogant and worry how people are going to look at you because you're dancing when you're doing a mitzvah before God. This is the pshat. This is the simple interpretation to the meaning of Simcha. Simcha shel mitzvah, the Simcha to rejoice when you're doing a mitzvah of God. And this is based on the Rambam in the Laws of Lulav, chapter 8, law number 15. In other words, even though the mitzvah itself is a mitzvah dealing with a holiday, the Rambam clearly goes on to say that this happiness should also continue when you do a specific mitzvah as well. As we see from King David, he was rejoicing when he brought back the ark. It wasn't Simchas Torah, it wasn't Passover, it wasn't Sukkot. He was doing a mitzvah of God. That is pshat. What is the remez? The remez, the hint, is that the word sameach, which means to rejoice, plus the letter yud, equals the word Mashiach. As the Rebbe once said, that all that is left is to rejoice. We did everything. But now we have to bring it to a whole new level, and to do it with Simcha, to do it with joy and gladness of heart. Furthermore, the letter is Yismach, which means I will rejoice, or you should rejoice, literally are the same letters as Mashiach. So one way of learning it is Sameach Yud, that a Jew should rejoice with Yud. Yud represents 10, with all 10 faculties, with all 10 attributes of the body and soul. And furthermore, in general, by rejoicing, you are bringing closer the coming of Mashiach. And similarly, we know that the word Shaliach, which means an emissary of God, plus Yud, equals Mashiach as well. And the Rebbe has told the Shaluchim many times that you have to rejoice, you have to be happy, because my emissaries represent me. And if someone is going to look at you, and you're not going to be happy, they're going to think that I am not happy, but I am happy. So therefore, anyone who wants to represent the Rebbe, a chassid, has to be joyous. That is the remez, the hint. What is drush? The homiletics and the halacha. We just mentioned that the Rambam said that King David was mefaziz umecharker. Mefaziz means he was dancing wildly, and umecharker means he was whistling and singing praises. Jews are allowed to whistle. At Fabrengen, the Rebbe would go like this, and we ask people to whistle. And I heard once, he told someone that because this individual at Fabrengen did not whistle properly and strong enough, one Jew was not turned on to Yiddishkeit. So there is a concept to rejoice in God and to whistle in joy. But there's a question that is asked, that in this chapter of Samuel, we find two different terminologies. First, it says in verse number 14, it says over there first that David mecharker, that David was like whistling and he was singing praises to God, b'chol oiz, with all his strength, and he was wearing a ephod bud, he was wearing a linen tunic. And then it goes on to say, they went further and they went up to Jerusalem, and they came to Ir David, they came to the city of David. And then it goes on to say that David increased in his joy, then mefaziz umecharker. And then it goes on to say that then he was dancing wildly, and then he was whistling and singing praises. So the question is, how come the first time in Pasuk number 14 it mentions that David is only whistling and he is singing praises to God, and he's wearing a avnei or a ephod bud, a linen tunic. And then it goes on to say further that they went up to Ir David, and then at that time it says mefazis umecharker. Then he was dancing wildly, and he was also whistling and singing praises. And here it doesn't say he was wearing a linen tunic. So the Rebbe makes a point of saying that this linen tunic was worn by prophets. And King David was a prophet. And we know that prophecy only rests on someone who's joyous. So therefore, outside of the city, which is more of a secluded place, David was entertaining the opportunity to receive prophecy. And by singing praises to God, that reveals God's prophecy. And therefore he was joyous, because you have to be joyous to receive God's prophecy. God does not dwell on people that are sad. He only dwells on people that are happy. We have to be happy. But as he got into the city and into Ir David, when there was more people there, and it was not the right place to meditate and to seclude oneself and to enter into a trance of prophecy, then he began to increase his joy, and he danced wildly as well to fulfill the mitzvah of returning the Torah and the ark to its proper place in Jerusalem. So this is the concept here of Drush. And on this level, perhaps we can also ask a question. Why was Michal, the daughter of Shaul, so upset? And David HaMelech says, no, I did the right thing. That's why God chose me over your father Shaul HaMelech. And the Rebbe goes on to explain that Shaul HaMelech represented intellect. And Michal, the daughter of Shaul, was also intellect. She was the daughter of her father. And therefore, based on the level of intellect, there has to be limitations. And therefore, David HaMelech, or a king, should not be dancing wildly. However, David HaMelech was known as David Avdi David, my servant, King David. King David was a servant of God. He went beyond intellect. And therefore, when a person goes beyond limitation and he goes beyond intellect, he truly becomes God's servant. And therefore, he was able to dance beyond all limitations and beyond all logic and beyond all understanding. As we know that Simcha Poritz Geder, Simcha, joy breaks through all boundaries. And therefore the joy has to be beyond all boundaries. And by doing so, one is able to truly acquire new heights and fulfill things that he never thought possible before. On this note, we can ask another question. If Simcha is so important, if joy is so important, why is it not enumerated as one of the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah? It's true, we bring a verse from Deuteronomy that because he didn't serve God with joy, and we also have a pasuk in Tehillim, serve God with joy, ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. Yet the Rambam is not enumerated as a specific mitzvah of one of the 613. He has to expound on it in his Sefer Hayad, in his book of code, in the laws of Lulav. He says, by the way, to rejoice by every mitzvah is actually a big thing. And to share two answers why the Rambam does not enumerate this mitzvah as one of the 613 mitzvahs. Number one, the Rambam says any mitzvah which is a general mitzvah, I do not enumerate. Simcha is a general mitzvah because it applies to every single mitzvah. Every mitzvah you do, from lighting Shabbos candles, from putting on tefillin, from giving tzedakah, charity, from keeping Shabbos, eating matzah and Pesach. Every mitzvah, even fasting on Yom Kippur, must be done with Simcha, must be done with joy. So therefore the Rambam says, I don't enumerate a general mitzvah, because all of the 613 mitzvahs have to be done with Simcha, have to be done with joy. It's not one mitzvah, it's bigger than one mitzvah. Another concept is that you cannot force someone to be joyous. Either you are joyous or you're not joyous. And therefore, it has to be, as we explained, pertaining to the mitzvah of tzitzis. It's such a great mitzvah. But God says, I want you to come to it on your own. I don't want to force it on you. If I force you to be joyous, it's going to be a limited joy. For the joy to be a boundless joy, it has to be l'daitecha. It has to be based on your knowledge, based on your own will. And therefore the Rambam does not want to limit it to a specific mitzvah, because the mere fact that you call it a mitzvah, it becomes already contained, and already becomes a limitation. And for the mitzvah to be unlimited, it has to come from within. And therefore it is not enumerated as one of the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. What is the soid? What is the esoteric level of the mitzvah? The Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, in chapter number 26, that when two people are wrestling, who is going to be victorious? Not the one who is necessarily bigger or heavier or even stronger. Rather, the one that is swifter and faster. He is the one that is going to win the match. The one who is sluggish is going to be defeated, says the Alter Rebbe. And the same is true if you want to defeat the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. You have to be fast. And the way to be fast is with joy. When you're sad, you're sluggish. You move very slowly. You have 100 or 1,000 pounds of rocks on your shoulder and you cannot move. But when you're joyous, you go very fast and you have the ability to trip and flip the Yetzer Hara on its back, and you have the ability to do the mitzvah properly. And therefore the Alter Rebbe goes on to say that sadness is a bad thing. It comes from the evil inclination. Even if you're sad because you did an aveira, you did a sin, the Yetzer Hara tries to trick you. Oh, you sinned the other day. How could you be happy now? Excuse me, I'm trying to put on film. I'm trying to eat matzah on Pesach. Why do you hacking me a chinik what I did last week? It's the Yetzer Hara trying to confuse you, and he's wearing over here a nice shtreimel, the Yetzer Hara, and he's putting on a silk, Zaydin the Zupitza, a long black jacket. He looks like a chassid, a real righteous person, but really he's an ox wearing a shtreimel. He's an ox wearing a long kapot. The Yetzer Hara is smart. He's very, very conniving. And he wants to dray you a cup. He wants to mix you around. You should become sad. Oh, you sinned 25 years ago. Once I remember you sinned. A yid has to be joyous. It's true. Yeah, you have to do tshuva. You have Yom Kippur. You do tshuva every year, once a year, for all the sins for the whole year. And if you're very, very pious, then Thursday nights before Shabbos, you make a reckoning. If you're even more pious, before you go to sleep, you make a reckoning. That's the time to reckon and to remember your sins and to do tshuva. But in the middle of the day when you're working, or the middle of the day when you're learning Torah, to start reminding yourself of a sin that you did in your youth, this is clearly the Yetzer Hara who is coming. He's garbed in the garments of a chassid, a holy, pious rabbi, and he's trying to get you down so that you don't serve God properly. Because he knows if you're joyous, you could do the mitzvahs beautifully, and you could do the mitzvahs on the highest level possible and bring Mashiach. And he doesn't want you to bring Mashiach. He wants to hold back the coming of Mashiach, which will come through joy. So says the Alter Rebbe that if a person comes to a state of bitterness over his sins, that is brought about with his own knowledge. In other words, you premeditate it, you choose the time and place to contemplate the sin, that's okay. And after that, you have to resolve to be good and to come stronger with more joy. But if it's something which is simply holding you down, that's not called bitterness, that is called sadness, and that is prohibited. And I do also want to make a statement, a disclaimer. I am not saying that, God forbid, if a person needs to take medication because he is manic depressive, I would never say to stop taking your medication. A Jew has to be happy. If you need medication, take medication. We're talking about now a Jewish religious concept here, that you're sad because of your sins, which has nothing to do with a chemical imbalance. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe goes on to say, and he concludes with the words of the Arizal. The Holy Arizal says, based on the words in the Torah and Deuteronomy, it says over there, and the Rambam quoted it earlier, Tachas asher lo yavarta as Hashem elikecha b'simcha v'tuvrei vav, because you did not serve God with joy and gladness of heart. And he concludes the pasuk, Miroiv koil. What does Miroiv koil mean? The simple interpretation means when things were good, when you had money, when you had food, then you didn't serve God with joy. Jews are always kvetching. It's never good enough. Oh, you had everything. You had a house, you had a job, you had money, and then you were still kvetching, so God gave you a reason to kvetch. That's a simple interpretation. But the Arizal says no. What does it mean? Because you did not serve God with joy, miroiv koil, says the Arizal that you didn't serve God with joy, a joy that is even greater than having everything. If a person would hand you a check for $1 million, would you dance? Would you joy? Would you be joyous? Would you be happy? Of course you would. If I gave you $10 million, would you be even more joyous? Yeah. If I gave you a treasure worth $100 million, you couldn't sleep the whole night. You'd be up dancing on the rooftop. Don't jump, but dance on the rooftop. When you do a mitzvah, every mitzvah you do is worth more than all the money in the world. So you should be joyous that you have the opportunity to do a mitzvah. Says the Arizal, that's the problem. That we were not joyous when we did the mitzvah. That's why we're in Golus, we're in exile. Because a Jew should be so happy that God chose him and gave him the opportunity to do a mitzvah. And the reward of the mitzvah is worth billions of billions of billions of dollars. And we're going to see the reward when Mashiach comes. So why are you sad? You should be joyous. So this is the answer according to Soid, the esoteric answer. Now what does it mean to be joyous? You have to be more joyous than anything in the world, than if you had all the money in the world. Like David HaMelech, who was dancing. And he told Michal, I understand your father was an intellect, and he was reserved, but I am David HaMelech, I am now the king. And I am Avdi David, God's servant. I'm not worried about my image, my kingship. I'm not arrogant. I'm humble before God. And that is the way a Jew should do a mitzvah. We should do a mitzvah with total joy. But now comes along Chassidus and takes it to a whole new level. And the Rebbe says, we say in Tehillim, Soivas HaMochos, that God satiates us with joy. And the Medrash says, don't read Soiva, read Sheva, 7 types of joy, which alludes to the 7 days of Sukkot. And the Rebbe goes on to say that it's not only 7 days of Sukkot, but we can say that there are 7 levels. There are 7 levels of joy. We're going to go through them very quickly. The first 3 levels are passive levels, inactive levels. These are levels that are God-given. The 4 additional levels are active levels, man's participation. Number 1, the fact that God created us, we should be happy. God didn't have to create us. He did. The first reason to rejoice. Can you imagine the King of all kings? The most powerful person in the world that we know, times it by 1,000,000 is God. And the truth of the matter is God is infinite. So this King of all kings created us. Wow, that must be important. The first reason to rejoice. Number two, not only did God create us, but He created us in His image. We look like Him. So when people look at us, they say, hey, that's the King. Wow. Another reason to rejoice. Number three, He also created times. He designated times to rejoice. So there are periods in the year which are joyous periods, like the holiday of Sukkot, like the 3 major festivals. One's birthday. There are many times throughout the year that we rejoice. There are times, specific times, that God created in the world to rejoice. 3 reasons that are God-given. Now, an additional 4 reasons why we should rejoice. Number 1, I rejoice because I have the opportunity to do God's will. L'shamesh es koini, to serve my master. God didn't simply create me and put on handcuffs and say, do nothing. He said, no, no, no. I want you to make me a dwelling place down here in this world. God is giving us a mission. Even if you have handcuffs on, you can still do God's mission wherever you are. Even in the darkest dungeons. We were created by God, and God said, me, little old me, can make God happy. So when you know you are making God happy, you are fulfilling God's will, that makes you happy. Can you imagine? The king wants me to bring him a cup of coffee. The king wants me to put on tefillin. Wow, and that makes him happy. When you go to an old age home and you help an old man there and they smile, you feel happy. Well, I made him smile. I can't believe it. We make God smile every day when we do a mitzvah. So that should make us rejoice even more. Number 5, the second reason on the active level. In addition to the fact that we are serving God, we have a mitzvah to serve God b'simcha v'tuv levav. That increases the joy. That we are told, be joyous. So we have to add the recipe, the ingredient of joy to the mitzvah. And as the Rambam said, this is a difficult task. It's a difficult task because I want to be sad. I want to feel miserable. I want people to feel bad for me. I want to be all day in bed doing nothing. So for me to get up and do things is difficult. That is the mitzvah. Number 6, in addition to the fact that I make God happy, in addition to the fact that I do the mitzvah with joy, there are holidays that are joyous holidays. All the major holidays, Passover, Shavuos, Sukkot, these are moyadim l'simcha. It's a 6th level. And a 7th level is on the days of Sukkot. Sukkot is not only a joyous holiday, but it's called Zeman Simchaseinu, the holiday of our joy. And then you have an 8th level even, which is totally beyond time and space. And that is Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah, the dancing with the Torah. And that is a level that's totally beyond time and space. Every Jew dances with the Torah. We become the feet of the Torah. It's a closed Torah. It's not based on our intellect of how much knowledge we have. And in truth, we don't have to wait for Simchas Torah. David HaMelech did it when he brought back the Torah to Jerusalem. When he brought back the Ark of God to Jerusalem, he was dancing. Mefazes v'mechaker. He was whistling and he was shouting and he was dancing wild. And you know what? Every single day of our life, we could reach that level of Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah is the mitochondria for the whole year. But we don't have to wait for Simchas Torah to be joyous on that level, on the 8th level. So here the Rebbe says that there are 8 levels of joy. And he goes on to say in other places, not only when we do a mitzvah, but even when we do our daily work for the sake of God, we have to be joyous. And the Rebbe quotes the Gemara. It says that a batchin, a joker, a comedian who makes other people joyous, and he is joyous, that individual acquires a place in paradise. Says the Rebbe, not only in paradise does he acquire a place, but also in this world. In other words, a person in this world who is joyous will be able to acquire a place in this world. He will be successful in this world. Because from head to toe, he is totally imbued with joy, with happiness. He can do anything he wants. He will be able to conquer this world, not only the world to come. We know the teaching of the Tzemach Tzedek, that the Rebbe would say many, many times, Trach gut wird sein gut. Think positive is going to be positive. Stop being so negative. I'm talking to myself also. Trach gut wird sein gut. You think good, it's got to be good. Don't help God. God knows what he has to do. You do yours, he'll do his. You got to daven and you got to learn Torah. God has to provide. And finally, to end with a story that is told in the introduction to the bestseller book written by Rabbi Joseph Telushkin called the Rebbe. He wrote a book on the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and in the introduction he says a very beautiful concept. He said, I worked on the book for 5 years. And when I came back from 770, after doing research, my wife said, I look happier. I'm uplifted. I'm joyous. Normally after a day in the library, he says, or doing research, he comes back sluggish, tired. Here he came back rejuvenated. And he said it was because of the Rebbe's approach to life, and the Chassidim who follow in the Rebbe's ways are so upbeat that I came back upbeat. And he gave a very good example. He said the Rebbe was careful in everything that he did, even when it came to words. What does that mean? The Rebbe insisted that a hospital should not be called a house of sick people, Beis HaCholim, like they called it in Israel, a house for the sick. But on the contrary, he should say, call it the house of healing. Because if you walk into a sick house, you get sick. If you walk into a house of healing, you become healed. It was all about changing the paradigm. Trach gut. And he said because of that, he himself changed the lingo of his vernacular. Instead of calling it a deadline, he called it a due date. Deadline means the end of life. Due date means new life. And that is the idea of Simcha, to bring joy into everything that we do. No one says it's easy. The Rambam says it's a difficult task. At the same time, the Rambam goes on to say that anyone who holds himself back from rejoicing is worthy of retribution. And therefore we should be like King David and be joyous not only on Simchas Torah, and be joyous not only on Purim, and not only when we do a mitzvah, but to be joyous all the time. And then not only will we conquer and acquire the world to come, but this world will become more meaningful and more joyous. And we will see the coming of Mashiach, who are the same letters as Simcha of Yismach, now Mamash, with joy and gladness of heart.